Exposed. Written by Suzana Thompson. Narrated by Lauren Sweet. Chapter 14. I was still in a trance as I drifted into the classroom and took my seat. Impressions of Mason lingered in my mind. The look in his eyes, the sound of his voice, the feel of his lips on mine. I was intoxicated by him, and the realization came slowly that I had fallen under his spell again. It felt exactly the same as when I first saw his picture and became captivated by him. I should have known better by now, but I felt the same magnetic pull toward him and had the same yearning in my heart to be with him. That's when I knew that my feelings for him hadn't been destroyed when he trampled on them. They'd only gone dormant, and they were rising to the surface now. The troubling thought that I might never be able to rid myself of them worried me, but I rejected that idea. It was just a crush, and of course, it would end eventually and be replaced by a new crush. I just had to keep my wits about me until then. What had I been thinking when I went to stake my territory at lunch today? Which was what I now realized I had been doing. I should have walked away when I saw Madison sitting with him instead of going to claim my spot beside him. If he cheated on me, he would lose the bet. That was exactly what I wanted, but I had become overcome with jealousy and sabotaged the opportunity. Not that he couldn't still cheat on me with her. All I had really done was make it more humiliating for myself if he did. I had made it obvious to him that it would bother me, when I should have been indifferent. I had to focus on the fact that it would free me from him. It would be good to gain some distance from him this weekend and concentrate on other people. Connecting with my friends would help me disconnect from Mason. I was probably only feeling this attachment to him because he was my entire social life right now. Once that changed, I would stop feeling so possessive of him. After all, I didn't even miss Addison anymore, and I had spent a lot more time with her. Mason would also fade into the background of my life after we went our separate ways. I ignored the fact that I couldn't imagine him ever fading into the background. He commanded attention whenever he stepped into a room, and I wasn't sure if that had more to do with his looks or the way he carried himself. Maybe it was just because he had come from a life of privilege and felt entitled to be deferred to by people with less money. Whatever it was, people reacted to it. He was always noticed. I could ignore him, however, if he left me alone. My awareness of him stemmed from the antagonism between us, but that was gone now. All that would be left was the memory of kissing him, but I would be more focused on new experiences. He would be living his life, and I would finally be living mine. That had yet to happen, though, because he insisted on driving me home after school.
"This is it for the week," he promised. "Since I drove you to school, I should drive you home. Besides, I have something for you."
I felt a jolt of excitement over his words. Had he decided to give me my poem back? I didn't dare voice that thought in the fear that appearing too anxious about it would prompt him to change his mind. Instead, I docilely went with him to his car. I was on pins and needles as he made small talk during the ride home, asking me if I was excited about going to the concert and about what other concerts I wanted to go to. I engaged in conversation with him as best I could, but he noticed my distraction.
"What's wrong?"
he asked as he pulled into my driveway and turned off the car. "Nothing," I replied, and forced a smile to convey that everything was fine.
"Ella,"
he said in a warning tone. "Nothing," I repeated. "It's just, you said that you have something for me?"
"Oh,"
he responded, as his tense expression relaxed.
Yeah, I've got the pictures.
He turned and reached into the back seat to grab his backpack. Pulling a large envelope out of it, he handed it to me.
Cassie sent them to me yesterday, and I went ahead and had them developed. I made some of them larger so you can put them in your modeling portfolio. I'll send you the digitals, too.
Oh, thanks, I said. Apparently, I didn't manage to hide my disappointment well enough, because he questioned me again.
What is wrong, Ella? Tell me,
he demanded. I thought you were going to give me back my poem, I admitted. He studied me in silence for a moment as I dropped my gaze to the envelope in my hands.
I'll give it back to you soon,
he said. My gaze shot back to him in surprise. You will?
Yeah,
he answered.
I think we...
Mason! My mom's voice interrupted him as it carried to us through his open window. We both looked and saw her approaching the car. Come inside, she urged. You don't need to sit out here. He glanced at me uncertainly.
I was just dropping Ella off,
he told her. Can't you stay just a little while? She asked him in a disturbingly flirty voice. You took off so fast yesterday that I hardly got a chance to thank you for the ice cream.
That was for Ella. Everything is for Ella,
he emphasized as he looked at her with a flat expression in his eyes. She glanced at me, and I could tell that it was more out of nervousness than to acknowledge my presence. Mason had managed to unnerve her, which I had never seen happen to her before. She always had men eating out of her hand, but he wasn't reacting to her in the way she was used to. At the same time, his declaration had done something entirely different to me. I felt strangely grounded and secure, even as my heart soared in elation.
Did you give it to her?
he demanded. Well, it was just so tempting that I couldn't help myself. I know I don't need the calories, she said, and gestured toward her beautiful body, recovering her confidence in the knowledge that she still possessed perfect curves. Mason's hard gaze remained on her face, though.
Don't you ever take anything that belongs to Ella.
She was startled by his harsh tone. I'm sorry. I didn't think that... It's okay, I cut in, wanting to end the conflict. I wasn't going to eat it anyway. I went out for ice cream yesterday with Zoe. See? She had ice cream, Mom told him brightly. Everyone is happy. He regarded her in stony-faced silence until she became so uncomfortable that she looked to me in desperation. How was school today, Ella? Good, I replied awkwardly, knowing that she had no real interest in hearing about my day. I decided to get out of the car so I could end this confrontation. Okay, thanks for the ride, Mason, I said as I opened the door and made a quick exit without waiting for a reply. He got out too, though, seemingly unwilling to leave yet as he came to stand beside me. Mom noticed the envelope in my hand and seized on it as a distraction from the awkwardness. What's that? These are the pictures, I replied. That cheered her up. Oh, yes, the pictures. Let me see them. I reluctantly handed them over to her. She pulled them out and set the envelope down on the hood of Mason's car without giving a thought to how he might react. I glanced warily at him, but he said nothing. Curious to see the pictures myself, I moved closer to look at them with my mom. I was surprised by how good they looked. I never stopped to take myself in this way, but my image in those pictures was eye-catchingly attractive. Even Mom exclaimed over them. These are perfect. You look beautiful, Ella. Her praise was wonderful to hear. I got so little validation from my mom that it affected me more than it should, considering that I tried not to focus on my looks.
She is Beautiful.
Mason spoke over my shoulder, and his compliment had even more of an impact on me. When your boyfriend tells you you're beautiful, it means a lot more than when your mom says it. Or maybe it was just how close he was standing to me. I sensed him behind me, radiating heat and warming me like the sun on my skin. It had the potential to be blazing hot, but right now, it was blissfully warm, and I soaked it up like sunshine. I settled back against him, and his arms came around my waist in an embrace that was perfect comfort and support. The electricity was there too, buzzing beneath my skin, but in latent mode right now. It began to spark when Mom came to the picture of us beside Mason's pool. She stopped and stared at it. I did too, at seeing how evident the sexual tension between us was in the photograph. It was so obvious that it was embarrassing, but also discomfortingly arousing for me to look at. Was that what people saw when they looked at us? Was the attraction between us that obvious all the time? My face went hot at the thought of it, and I suddenly wanted out of Mason's arms. He let go of me in that instant and stepped away from my body. "This is amazing. I didn't know that you're a model too," Mom said. "The agency will love this. I bet they don't get a lot of people applying together, so you'll stand out."
"I'm not applying,"
Mason told her.
"These are just for Ella. I already sent them digital ones of her."
Mom balked and dropped the pictures before spinning around to look at him. "You applied for her? Which agency did you send it to?"
"All the top ones,"
he replied.
"Might as well go for it if you're going to go for it."
"What?" I exclaimed. "How could you do that without asking me? You heard me tell her that I don't want to be a model." "What did you put for her height?" Mom asked, seemingly as upset as me. Mason answered her first.
5'6". I checked her driver's license to make sure.
He then began to speak to me.
"It doesn't hurt to try, Ella. You can always tell them no if—"
"You shouldn't have done that," Mom interrupted him in distress. "They want tall girls, so I was going to put that she's 5'9" so they'd give her a chance. They told me I was too short, but I was hoping that maybe Ella could—" I whirled on her as I cut her off. "Wait, they turned you down? You said that you couldn't go because of me." "Of course. I couldn't go on modeling shoots with a baby," she retorted. "But they turned you down anyway," I said. "All this time you made me feel like it was my fault, like I kept you from your dream, when it had nothing to do with me at all." "I would have tried again," she insisted. "I would have gone there and seen them in person, and I would have talked them into giving me a chance, just like you'll have to do now that he screwed this up for you." For the first time, she cast a disapproving look at Mason.
"Sorry I'm not a liar," he shot back. "How would that have made her look when they found out she lied about her height? Don't you think they would have noticed she's not 5'9" when they met her?"
She waved his logic off in exasperation. "That wouldn't matter when she got her foot in the door. Other short models have made it big. It's just about making the right connections."
"And how do you expect her to do that?"
he asked. "There are ways," she said. "A lot of doors will open for a beautiful girl if she knows what she's doing. I'll just have to make sure she meets the right people." "This is over," I declared, and stepped over to scoop the pictures up from the hood of his car and return them to the envelope. Just because I didn't care about modeling didn't mean that I didn't want to keep these photographs for myself. I never wanted this anyway, and I'm not going to beg anyone to make me a model.
"What ways?"
Mason pressed, with an edge to his tone that made me take notice. His hard gaze was fixed on Mom. She didn't appear intimidated in the least, and she let out a bitter laugh. "Look at you, getting all possessive like you care. You want to be her one and only, but you still get to play around, don't you? And if she comes to you and she really needs you, where will you be then?" Sorry, babe, she said, pitching her voice lower in imitation of a masculine tone. But I'm still in high school. I don't know what you expect me to do. Her own gaze hardened. You have to look out for yourself in this world. That's what I found out, and that's what Ella's gonna do. His expression became unreadable as he regarded her, and I was fascinated to know what he might be thinking. He revealed nothing as he spoke, though.
Seems we both want to look out for Ella, he replied crisply. I'm just wondering what your version of that is.
Her eyes sparked with anger, and she sneered at him. My version has her becoming rich and famous. What are you gonna do for her besides get in her pants? Mom, I exclaimed in embarrassment, but both of them ignored me as they continued their standoff.
Does that bother you?
Mason challenged.
Me getting in your daughter's pants?
No, she answered, nonplussed. I've had her on the pill since she was 14, so I'm not worried about it. My face flamed in mortification at her revealing that to him. She made it sound like I'd been having sex since I was 14, when in reality I'd never needed birth control at all. Unbeknownst to her, I'd never taken one pill and had thrown them all away instead.
And are you worried about guys wanting to get in her pants in exchange for making her rich and famous?
Mason asked so smoothly that he could have been talking about any neutral topic instead of me trading sexual favors for fame and wealth. Mom shrugged like it was no big deal. That's how it works. It's called the casting couch. Mason stiffened.
No, it's called sexual harassment.
She rolled her eyes. That's just ugly girls bitching about being stupid enough to believe they could get anywhere by spreading their legs. Maybe that would work in business or somewhere boring like that, but not in Hollywood. You still have to have the right look. And Ella does. Mason smiled, but in his eyes was the look of a predator.
Ella?
He said, in a tone that could almost pass for pleasant.
We're leaving now.
He spared a brief glance at me.
Bring your bathing suit.
I debated for all of 2 seconds before realizing that he wasn't going to leave without me, and that I needed to get him away from my mom before he snapped. I wasn't sure what he would do if he did, but I didn't want to find out. I had assured Alice that Mason would never hurt me physically, but my faith in his control of his temper didn't extend to my mom's safety around him. She might be a trigger for him, so I tried to get her to come into the house with me, but she shook me off. I won't steal your boyfriend, she threw out with a careless laugh that set me on edge. Gritting my teeth, I stomped off into the house and up to my room. Setting the pictures down on my desk, I yanked open my dresser drawer and pulled out my one-piece swimsuit. Despite thinking that my mom would deserve what she got if she tried to put the moves on Mason, I hurried back outside to them. To my relief, Mason was sitting in his car with the engine running. His window was closed, and he wasn't looking at my mom, who stood beside him watching him. She appeared unharmed, and she glanced at me with a smirk. Well, she said, I'm glad you're on the pill. That boy is all man. Before I could even try to guess her reason for saying that, Mason's voice snapped at me like a whip.
Ella, get in the car.
It startled me, since I hadn't heard him put his window down. My gaze shot toward him, and I saw his hard expression fixed on me. It prompted me to move and quickly get in the car. Mason started backing out as soon as I shut my door. He came to an abrupt stop at the end of the driveway.
Seatbelt,
he commanded tersely. He spun the car out onto the street as soon as I complied and peeled off with a screech of tires. Adrenaline surged through me even after he eased off the gas and settled into a normal, steady speed. Mason remained tense, and I didn't dare ask him why he was so angry. He drove in silence to his house and directed me to change in a spare bedroom.
Come out to the pool when you're done,
he told me. There were no heated looks and no sexual tension between us this time. I wasn't worried about him trying to see me change out of my clothes, but I walked out to the pool in wariness of his mood. He was swimming laps back and forth from one end of the pool to the other. I stood and watched him for a couple of minutes before he noticed me.
"Come in,"
he urged, and went back to swimming laps without another word. Feeling free to take advantage of the opportunity presented to me, I indulged in having the pool practically to myself. Swimming laps until I tired, I then floated lazily on my back as I gazed at the blue sky and basked in the sunshine. To my surprise, Mason joined me and floated beside me in peaceful silence. The tension that had been emanating from him earlier was gone now, and I relaxed into a near trance until he spoke and drew my attention.
"You're welcome to use the pool anytime you want. You can invite Zoe, too."
"Thanks," I replied, "and thank you for inviting me today. This is so much nicer than going to the Y. I love swimming outside." He stood up and came over to me.
"Why haven't you been going to the rec center then? They have an outdoor pool."
"People from school go there," I answered. "I try to avoid them as much as I can." He looked pained.
"Because of me. I'm sorry, Ella. I had no idea what you were dealing with."
I gave him a disbelieving look. You didn't know that they would harass me after you told them all those nasty lies about me and my mom?" His gaze sharpened, and his voice sounded softly dangerous.
"How did they harass you?"
"They called me all kinds of names and treated me like dirt," I told him. I didn't want to hear it, so I avoided places where I knew they went.
"Did anyone ever touch you?"
he asked. "No," I responded. Feeling too agitated by this conversation to relax any longer, I stood up too. The water was up to my nose, though, so I swam over to the side of the pool. Mason followed me and stood beside me as I held on to the edge. He expelled a big breath as he gazed at me with a troubled expression.
I actually felt sympathy for her for a minute when she was talking about her asshole boyfriend leaving her to deal with her pregnancy on her own.
As I realized that he was referring to my mother, he took a shaky breath before his expression hardened.
"Then she started making plans to prostitute you, and I wanted to strangle her."
I gaped at him. "Prostitute me? Do you really believe that escort stuff you've been telling everyone?"
"The casting couch,"
he snapped.
"Do you know what that is? She wants you to trade sexual favors for modeling jobs."
"Oh," I said dismissively. "I don't want to be a model anyway, so I don't have to worry about it."
"But she wanted you to do it. She actually wanted you to have sex with guys for money. What kind of mother is that? I thought mine sucked, but yours is even worse."
I looked away from him uncomfortably, reluctant to acknowledge that as truth. She has crazy ideas sometimes, but she's not so bad.
"You're a very forgiving person,"
he said.
"I'm not, but I'll tolerate her for you."
I turned to look at him in surprise. "You will?" He gave me a pained smile.
"If I want to be with you, then I have to put up with her, don't I?"
Something lightened in my chest, causing a tentative smile to surface on my face. I knew how much he hated my mother, but he was willing to put up with her for me? He wanted to be with me that much? His expression turned serious.
"That whole casting couch thing. I would never do that."
Okay," I said, slightly bewildered with the direction of his thoughts. "Yeah, of course you shouldn't do that to get a job. It's not worth it." I shuddered at the thought of being molested by some sleazy, middle-aged pervert. He reacted in bewilderment himself before barking out a laugh.
"No, not me on the casting couch."
His amusement was brief, though, and his smile quickly faded.
"I meant I wouldn't do that to you. To anyone. I wouldn't use my power to get sex. I want you to know that I wouldn't have tried to blackmail you into it."
"I wouldn't have let you," I declared. "I would have let you post the picture before I would do that."
"Good,"
he said, sounding like he meant it.
"I'm glad to know you won't go for something like that, even if your mother pressures you into it."
I looked at him in dismay. Of course I wouldn't let her talk me into having sex with someone for a job. I can't believe you thought I would.
"With all that pressure on you from your own mother,"
he began, looking troubled.
"I wouldn't blame you for that. I would blame her and whatever perverted asshole took advantage of you."
His jaw clenched at that imagined scenario. A fluttery sensation gained momentum in my stomach in response to his protectiveness and understanding for me. "You don't have to worry about that," I told him, instinctively reassuring him without giving any thought as to why I would need to.
"I was worried about it,"
he said.
"I would go crazy if someone had sex with you. I would go out of my fucking mind."
My pulse jumped and then skittered at his admission, and the butterflies in my stomach went into a frenzy. "Mason," I said, my voice sounding so shaky that he had to know how he affected me.
"Ella,"
he responded, as his gaze became electric. His touch sent a charge through me as he took hold of me and pulled me into him. My legs wrapped around his waist in the cool water as he brought his hot mouth to mine. It was so sexy that I moaned as his tongue caressed mine. "I'm glad I caught you before you got naked this time." I gasped in shock and quickly unentangled myself from Mason at the sound of the woman's voice. Clinging to the side of the pool again, I looked up at her and got another shock as I recognized her.
"Mom,"
Mason said flatly.
"I didn't know you were coming home."
There was nothing in his expression to indicate that he had missed her or was glad to see her. Her own gaze showed mild fondness as she looked at him. "Yes, well, my plans changed suddenly, and I missed you," she threw out, like it was an afterthought. "I decided I might as well come see you and catch up with you."
"Might as well,"
he agreed. She apparently mistook the sarcasm in his voice for aggravation over her interruption of our kiss. "Sorry I interrupted your little tryst, but you can see your girlfriends any time. I'm only here for a week, so it's not too much to ask for you to spend this time with me."
"It's not much at all,"
he stated. Once again, his criticism of her went right over her head. "Good. Now go shower and get dressed. We have dinner reservations at 6. I had moved down away from them as they spoke, and I tried to unobtrusively pull myself out of the pool and quietly slip away. Mason pulled himself out in a flash with his strong arms, though, and bypassed his mother to come and help me to my feet.
"Mom,"
he said, as he kept hold of my hand and turned to face her.
"I'd like you to meet my girlfriend, Ella."
Surprise showed on her face before her gaze shifted to me. Then her mouth dropped open as she stared at me in complete shock.
"This is Ella, Mom."
Mason's voice sounded like he was urging her to accept that rather than stating a fact.
She's Ella,"
he finished, seemingly at a loss for words. Her gaze snapped toward him. "Her daughter?"
"Yeah,"
he confirmed uncomfortably. The horrible realization hit me then, and my stomach sank. Never in my life had I hated looking like my mother as much as I did in that moment. Knowing that she had seen the spitting image of the woman her husband had cheated on her with when she looked at me made me ashamed to be standing in front of her. My gaze dropped to the cement at my feet, and I pulled my hand out of Mason's grasp. "Sorry," I expelled inadequately, and backed up before turning to hurry away.
"Ella,"
Mason called after me, but I fled into the house. I went immediately upstairs and put my clothes on right over my wet bathing suit in my hurry to be gone from this place. I was flooded with renewed shame as I thought about the position Mason's mom had caught us in. Even if she hadn't known who I was, I had already made a bad impression on her. The only thing I could do now was remove myself from her sight. As I clambered down the stairs in my haste, Mason moved into view at the bottom of them.
You didn't have to rush off like, Jesus, Ella, you didn't even change.
I glanced past him anxiously, looking for his mom.
She left,
he told me. I halted in dismay. Left? Where did she go?
Back to her hotel. She's going to send a car for me, but we have time. You can go back up and change out of your bathing suit before I drive you home.
I had forgotten that he had driven me here, but that barely registered through my bewilderment. She went to a hotel? He responded with a cold smile.
You didn't think she'd slum it here, did you?
He questioned derisively. I gaped at him. She doesn't stay here with you? He gave me another thin smile.
My mom is used to 5-star treatment. She's not going to rough it here without maid service and a staff to cater to her.
But she just said she wanted to spend time with you, I almost protested. I closed my mouth instead to prevent myself from pointing that out. I didn't want to make Mason feel any worse than he already did. But anger at his mother flared to life within me. Her selfishness hurt her son, and I was starting to hate her for it. She left him alone most of the time, and then she couldn't even make a small sacrifice for him for the short time that she was here. Composing myself, I attempted a joke to lighten the mood. No wonder you said she's a terrible housekeeper.
Yeah,
he said flatly.
She doesn't keep house at all.
Well, I said, going into my default mode of making excuses for her like I did with my mother. Heiresses aren't known for their housekeeping skills. When you grow up with maids doing everything for you, like someone I know, I added, with a pointed look at him, which was more playful teasing to get him out of his funk than actual criticism. He scoffed.
My mom's not an heiress. She grew up in a suburb like this. But she acts like she came from the ghetto the way she carries on about never going back. I grew up with a housekeeping staff, but I'm handling this better than she is. Granted, I have maids come clean once a week, but I pick up after myself from day to day. It's not like I can't lift a finger to do anything.
I didn't know which of these surprising revelations to tackle first. But you had a bunch of dust and dirt, I exclaimed. He gave me a sheepish smile.
Yeah, I canceled maid service for a couple of months so you'd have more to clean.
He shook his head.
I really was an asshole to you.
I didn't know what to do with that statement, besides feeling a general sense of satisfaction that he acknowledged it without any prompting from me. Feeling no need to belabor the point he had already stated, I moved on to the other thing he had told me. Your mom didn't grow up rich? How did she meet your dad?
She was his secretary,
he replied with another thin smile.
Isn't that a cliché?
He remarked.
But I guess she knew what she was doing since she became his wife.
I bristled at that comment. You make it sound like she planned it. Maybe she fell in love with him. Did you ever think of that?
She made it pretty clear she didn't give a shit about him,
he retorted.
She was always going somewhere without him. No wonder he
cheated on her, I demanded. You think it was okay for him to do that? Did you see her face when she saw me? Did that look like a woman who didn't care that her husband cheated on her?
It was just the shock,
he said defensively.
You look so much like your mother that it just stunned her for a minute.
Why would she even remember my mom's face if she didn't care about who he slept with? I challenged. His jaw clenched before he replied.
He died in bed with her. That's not something you forget.
That pretty much killed the conversation, and Mason offered to drive me home after a moment, during which neither one of us said anything as we avoided looking at each other. It wasn't until I was alone in the shower, washing off the chlorine from his pool and thinking about everything that had happened there this afternoon, that my mind focused on what his mom had said about catching him before he got naked this time. The realization that she had caught him naked in the pool with another girl in the past brought a clarity that I didn't want to face. What could be sexier than being half naked in a private pool with Mason? I wondered how many girls he had seduced there. That was why he had brought me there, and it had worked on me just as easily as it had on the others. If his mom hadn't interrupted us, I tried to imagine what would have happened, but I wasn't sure. Would I have stopped him or succumbed entirely to desire? The fact that I didn't know troubled me greatly. I couldn't predict my own actions around him, and that was scary. At least those other girls had presumably known what they wanted. They knew they wanted to be with Mason, but I kept telling myself that I didn't. Did I even know what I wanted anymore? I kept losing myself in him and forgetting everything else, and that was going to ruin me. I had to break his hold on me, even if it took drastic measures. I texted Josh after my shower. "Is there anywhere where we can be alone?" He responded almost immediately.
My house. When can I pick you up?
Now. I was only slightly nervous after I sent that text, which told me that I recognized Josh as a safe choice. I knew exactly what I wanted from him, and I could picture step by step how it would all go. It was simple, easy, and uncomplicated. I didn't have all these conflicted feelings about him, and the attraction between us wasn't too intense. I could handle it without losing control, without forgetting who I was or what I was doing. Conversely, I needed him to affect me enough to replace Mason in my thoughts, which meant that I needed to take it further with him than I had with Mason. Exposed to you as I breathe your name, hoping, wishing that you feel the same. With every heartbeat, I reveal to you that every kiss is real and true. Lost behind smoky eyes, I search for you and try to see. A text message alert startled me, but I froze when I saw what I had written on the piece of paper I had earlier been doodling on as I waited for Josh to let me know he was on his way. He had told me that he was going to take a quick shower before picking me up. I grabbed my phone and saw that he had texted me. Replying to him with a simple, "Okay," I shoved the poem I had been writing into my desk drawer and hurried downstairs. I didn't want to think about what it meant or why I had pulled it from my subconscious. I tried to focus on my plans with Josh and get in the right mood for what I was about to do. Since my mom and dad weren't home, I didn't have to deal with my dad interrogating Josh before I could leave with him. We could have stayed here, but I didn't want to take the chance of my dad catching Josh here alone with me. I couldn't have him making a bad impression on my dad when he was the boy that I could bring home to meet my parents. Mason wasn't ever supposed to play that role. Josh showed once again that he wasn't the smooth operator that Mason was. The nervous excitement emanating from him was exactly what I would have expected from a teenage boy about to spend private time alone with a girl. Mason, I now realized, had the cool, sexy confidence of a man. "That boy is all man," I remembered my mom saying, and I understood what she meant. I wondered what had made her come to that conclusion, though.
Are you okay, Ella?
Josh's voice roused me from my thoughts, and I blinked at him. "Yeah, why?"
You looked kind of mad," he replied. Did you still want to come inside?"
I glanced out and saw that we had apparently arrived at his house. "Oh, yeah, okay." I could see the excitement surge within him again, and his voice was shaky with it.
Okay.
He pushed open his door and got out quickly. I was slower, but he came around and took my hand to pull me out of my seat. Your parents aren't home? I inquired, double-checking to be sure.
Business trip, he told me. They won't be home until Monday.
My parents aren't home either, but they only went out to dinner for their anniversary, I said, glad that he had the house to himself for a longer time, and that I wouldn't have to worry about his parents coming home at an inopportune time.
We have all night,
he confirmed, with that mixture of nervousness and excitement. I knew that I couldn't stay all night, and I wasted no time once we were inside his house. Initiating a kiss, I hoped that he would take over, since I had no experience beyond this. He did, after leading me up to his room. It looked exactly like I had always imagined a teenage boy's bedroom to look. Messy, with posters of bikini-clad models on his walls. His bed was unmade, but it didn't matter to me when he gradually laid me down on it after we kissed for a while, seated together on it. He stretched out beside me on his side as he resumed kissing me. I made no protest when he placed his hand on my breast, and his kisses became more passionate as he fondled it. He grew bolder and moved his hand beneath my shirt to touch me through my bra. He soon removed both my shirt and my bra, but the thought that he wasn't the first guy to see me this way flitted through my mind. Mason had seen more, and his gaze had affected me much more intensely. It was the worst possible time for thoughts of him to intrude, and I tried to push them out of my mind and focus on the lust in Josh's eyes as he stared at my breasts. When he reached out to touch one, there was a new sensation to distract me, until I began to imagine that it was Mason touching me.